Now we are.
There we are. Hello, everyone. So I heard your complaints. I just want everybody to know before we start the show today, I heard your complaints, and I purchased this, a brand new clock.
Oh,
all right, so this clock back here tells time as if it's traveling through time in some weird way.
the clock is about as accurate as you telling the date and year from
Right. So I'm getting rid of this clock. It's going to go on Patreon to one of our lovely. If you want a clock, somebody, one of our Patreon subscribers is going to get the old clock. If you want a clock that goes from 5:15 like this just did to 6:23 randomly, that would be good.
So it's a time machine without the DeLorean.
Right. Now you know how when clocks are on in advertisements, they're always at 10:10. You know this. Have you seen this before? This is like a common advertising thing. Notice whenever you see a watch, it's always at 10:10. You know, with the hands like this. And I actually was taught that this was actually a.
We just lost Kevin.
Oh shoot.
He wasn't interested in it.
Reinvite him.
Okay, I was actually taught that this is a subliminal thing. You know, to represent something. That I don't want to get into, but anyway, that's what that was. And so and I took an advertising course, and that's honestly what they said. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty funny because that's why they would always be at 10:10. But that only makes sense if your clocks have hands on them, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
why would like a clock that's a digital clock? Like this one, so this one like be at 10:10. Like it's like the weirdest. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, they figure it's an antiquated way of advertising, so they're going to use that for the antiquated clock.
Somebody who knows that's what you do with clocks, but doesn't know why. So I'm taking this clock out. Put it together right now. Here's Kevin.
Kevin, we knew you were bored with X clock conversation.
No, I'm just putting this on now. So put this up real fast. It's a little different.
I don't know why I keep freezing up, but nothing has changed for me. My wireless is still in the same spot.
It's really strange. I don't know.
Yeah, you're fine now. You're fine now. So let's just.
I don't know. We'll get started.
Yeah.
You guys, I was gonna do this.
The other weird thing is the invite doesn't stay. Like I.
Oh really?
Clicked on it and it'll disappear.
Yeah, it's because of this new.
Sorry.
Please, let's start, please.
All right, ready?
This is why this clock is not going to work.
Yeah,
it's not going to work fine.
You're banging it against the table.
Get the other battery out of the other clock. That's what I was trying to do. All right.
It doesn't work. Hit it harder.
I know people get mad. You have no idea, like, kind of emails I got about this. People and it's weird because most of the people watch our show in tape delay. So why this clock matters to them, I do not know. Oh, that's not working. Anyway, I'll fix it here. All right.
You're killing me.
All right, let's start the show. Ready?
It's as good as the bubble chair.
No, it's not. It's really not. All right, here we go. All right. It's the 4th, right? November 4th?
Yes.
Okay.
Friday too.
4 days away from the apocalypse.
Right, 4 days till Trump roll. All right, here we go. All right. Bing. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, November 4th. So frazzled. It's so late. It's 5 o'clock. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, November 4th, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time or times around in the afternoon sometimes. So we're doing a late show today, and a couple reasons. We had some technical stuff earlier. We really wanted to have Kevin on. And also, I had thought of this idea that maybe we would start doing on Friday shows later because it's time to talk about the weekend, and we got lots of stuff going on, and give you something to come to kind of get you through your last hour at work or so. So, because people are always complaining that we only do it at lunch sometimes, and they have to do it then. So we're going to try something here. So, but let's get started today with the interesting, rather peculiar story of Kari Ramo, who you guys all know that I am a huge fan of. I actually think Kari Ramo is a very good goalie, and I've gone down that road before, and to much mockery and scorn.
And deservedly so.
From Mike and Russ here. But I actually do like Kari Ramo. I think he's a good goalie. And he today shows up on the ice at practice with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a free agent. He's still a free agent, hasn't signed a contract or anything like that, so he's not under any obligation, no deals or anything like that. But he shows up, and Mike, what's happening? Like, why are they just throwing in the towel and going to Kari Ramo right now?
They're not.
That's not what they're doing.
Yeah. After Frederik Andersen dropped the ball the last 2 games and played great. No, what's going on is Kari Ramo, his agent, and Lou Lamoriello apparently, they know each other, and Ramo is recovering from an ACL injury from last year. Frederik Andersen made over 40 saves last night in a victory over the Sabres, and Ramo took to the ice and basically gave Andersen a little bit of a break. He was out there as well, taking a couple shots, but they didn't want him participating fully in practice. The Leafs are at 50 contracts right now, but the thing I look at is, they have one goaltender in the AHL who's injured right now. He may be coming back fairly soon, so you could see Ramo, who has not been medically cleared yet, maybe sign a PTO to get a couple games in. With teams like Boston and Los Angeles, with all their goalies being AHL goalies right now, even though Budaj has been playing fairly well since being called up, a guy like Ramo, who is available in a UFA, might have an opportunity to get a contract somewhere. It even could be in Toronto, because if Toronto decides to trade Jonas Enroth, who's only making $750,000, and a team like LA, he was with LA last year, or a team like Boston, who played against him when he was in Buffalo, if they're interested in a pro contract like him, in a veteran experienced goaltender like Enroth, then that might make sense. And Ramo would come in as the backup. But right now, it's just he's practicing with them, and they're doing him a favor. That's all.
Something you might not be aware of, Mike, but the turnaround for Frederik Andersen, what is saving his career in Toronto, is Netflix. That's what CBC is reporting, that
Really?
Netflix relaxes him and he watches the supernatural shows on there, and that has helped his turnaround. So I'm just letting you know that.
Okay.
How would you describe supernatural show? What is that exactly?
I mean, I'm assuming he likes the Marvel shows. They've got a lot of Marvel shows on there, like
Flash, yeah.
Has anyone seen the
Ranger.
no, not Flash, like Luke Cage. Flash is DC.
Kevin, I know you're a Marvel person. Doctor Strange, have you gone to
I haven't seen it yet, no. So I will at some point, though.
It looks good. It looks good.
It does look good.
He's the magic superhero. Kind of. That's what my son describes him. He's the superhero who can do magic. I'm with him. Netflix is the only reason that I've been successful with HockeyBuzz.com. Netflix keeps me going too, as well. I mean, Netflix and Hulu, combination of those two. But yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. So no, Fred, I bring this up all to be partially silly and partially serious, because I do think that I have a theory. Thanks, Mike. I have a theory here, and I want Kevin's opinion on this, on Mike Babcock and Lou Lamoriello, that they are not the kind of people who are going to be okay with a struggling goalie for very long. And I know that they're okay with him for now, and it's a 5-year deal. But there is nothing, I don't think, that either of these people like more than having a steady goalie, right? I mean, these are two guys who really are into that concept.
Well, I agree with you, but the 5-year contract is it's a very important issue. And it's also the fact that they know, I mean, they look at that defense every night, and, they kind of know, where this team is at. Like, it's not really ready yet because they haven't really worked on the defense the way they worked on the offense. And, the offense is very impressive, to the point that I think they're one of the more entertaining teams to watch. But, the defense leaves much to be desired. So I think because of that, I think that they're going to have a lot of patience with Andersen, to be sure. Now, that doesn't mean they won't explore a second option if they think, Ramo is the guy that, can help them. But I think they're going to go in long-term with Andersen, and that continues to be the plan.
I mean, I would think, Kev, that he was probably briefed before he was signed and said, listen, we're giving you 5 years, but you understand a couple of years could be a little rough. And I think that's part of his contract, really. I think he's probably expecting that.
Yeah, and he's still young enough that he can be part of the future. That's the key in bringing him in. And I think Anderson's a quality goalkeeper. I just think he needs time and I don't care who you put in that net right now with the defensive team that they have. I mean, he's not going to be a superstar.
Although I did predict the win against Buffalo, and they did win against Buffalo. Mike predicted a loss. Well, but that's just the way it goes.
Mike always predicts a loss.
Well, when they go 1-17-1 in their last 19 games, it would be like clueless to predict a victory. And if you looked at it, somebody was saying, when did Dominic Hasek start playing for the Leafs? Because that was the type of performance that Anderson had last night. He was incredible. But I mean, I'll disagree with Eck here. I do not think that the Leafs are going to destabilize their goaltending situation further. I mean, Anderson's the guy. They've given him 5 years.
I don't doubt that. You're not disagreeing with me. I agree with what you're saying there. I just said that they're trying. It's funny for me to watch Babcock and Lamoriello.
Yeah.
Say, oh, he's just having a bad week. And I'm like, he's having a bad, like, these are not two guys who are always like, oh, he's going to be fine. He's just having a bad couple months. He's a couple games. I mean, and I know that this is a big picture, expect pain Maple Leafs team, right? But I've also seen Lou Lamoriello and Babcock, freak out when goalies have bad months. I mean,
right.
Not be happy about it. It would do very often because Lou had a goalie that was solid for a decade. But even then, he would have, issues if Brodeur looks slightly tired, or anything like that. I mean, you saw all this, so that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that.
But after the rough start, he's had 3 really good games in a row. So it would make absolutely no sense for them and show no being attuned to your own team to bring in Kari Ramo as like not saying that you're bringing him in as a threat, but to bring in Kari Ramo after Anderson has played 3 of his best games.
Right.
He's played, I think, 9 games right now.
But this was a big win for the Leafs because for people like Mike that said they were stuck in the mud with that 117-1 thought, like you could never, win there, they did. And it does show that they are turning the corner at least because now it's a different Leafs team, and this team probably doesn't think about going in there and losing. There's not that many guys on the roster that have had that in their head for a long time.
It's definitely a step in the right direction, Russ, but, you have to remember also Buffalo's without Eichel, without Kane, without Bogosian, and they only won 2-1. So I give them full marks. Marner played great, and Anderson stood on his head. But when you start when a team is 40 games under 500 in their 46 years of their in the 46 years that Buffalo's been in existence, 1 game, 1 win, and the first one since 2013 is not going to.
Didn't the Cubs teach you anything?
Lifetime record of the Sabres.
Yeah, let me ask you this: have we reached the point already, Mike, where now you're not even happy with the win? They
didn't score enough.
That's what he said. Like he made it like it was only a 2-1 win. Like,
there are people at Yale University, Kevin, that are studying Mike specifically. That's why we have these missions, because there are people who are doing tests on what it is like to be a lifelong Maple Leafs fan. And they are looking at him as the perfect example, of a player, of somebody who wants them never to lose, wants them to tank, wants them to.
That's what he said. He said it was only a 2-1 win.
If you're an ice cream taster at Friendly's and you say it's not vanilla enough, that's good. That's a good recommendation. But when you win a game, you win a game.
I'm just trying to keep things in perspective.
I understand.
The parade. I mean,
nobody's saying they've turned the corner, but one point about Babcock and Lamoriello, like we always talk, and I've been guilty of this as well. Saying, look, traditionally, historically, they can't take this type of situation, but they've never been in this situation before, so we really don't know how they will really react in this situation, and they've surprised us a little bit. I mean, like the defense of Babcock of his goalie, earlier when he wasn't playing well. I mean, I hadn't seen that before. He basically said that he's my guy.
Right. When have you ever heard about? I mean, that's who was a great goalie, never got that.
Yeah. My point is that we shouldn't be too surprised of how they react, because they're faced with a different situation, and behind closed doors, like they both may be very, very excited about what they have cooking here, and they may be saying, "Hey, if we could get draft another good defenseman here this season, and we can trade for a young defenseman, who knows?" Like they may be excited by all this, and so I don't know that they'll be impatient.
Well, the one thing that's weird, and they're very obviously two experienced, and one NHL coach, one NHL general manager, both have won Stanley Cups. Their resumes are fantastic. They're two very strong-willed guys, and a guy like Frank Corrado, who we know Frank Corrado's not an all-star defenseman, but I think he's an NHL defenseman.
Yeah.
And Lou Lamoriello claimed him off of waivers at the beginning of last season. And he did not play in the first half of the year. Basically, they sent him down on a conditioning stint, and only after they started trading away people did he get in the lineup. This year, he played really well in training camp. They kept 8 defensemen because they didn't want to risk one of them going through waivers and getting claimed. And 11 games, and with this defense playing as badly as it has at times, Frank Corrado has been a healthy scratch 11 games in a row. And the only thing I can come up as a conclusion is Lou Lamoriello claimed this guy without the say-so of Mike Babcock, and Mike Babcock doesn't want to play him. I mean, maybe that's wrong, but that's the impression that's out there about a guy like Frank Corrado. So sometimes I get the impression they're not on the same page.
I don't know. I think that they are.
I do too.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with them both, and there are no warning signs on this. I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to disagree on players.
Yeah, it's going to.
Babcock says it all the time that when he was with Kenny Holland, they disagreed often about things, but when Kenny Holland's kid got married, Babcock was at the wedding, and everybody.
Yeah, right. Everybody's fine.
Everybody held hands and sang "Kumbaya."
It's okay.
So I think that's just part and parcel, and Mike may be right about the defenseman, but it also just may be that. Babcock is sending a message for 11 straight games that the kid's got to, work harder or do something or improve, or, you never know what's going on sort of behind the scenes.
I think that at some point we're going to see, a reality thing happen in that city. And I don't know when it's going to be. Like, I don't know when right now we're still living in an alternate reality. And at some point we're going to get to the regular reality, but we're not there yet. And that's okay that we're not there yet. And I think that that's the way they're doing it. And I mean, I could see Lou Lamoriello signing him, bringing him up last year, and purposely saying he's not going to play till next year at the end of the that's just Lou Lamoriello. He has that in his head. Like, he'll set up that's how he wants to do things. He is a long tail guy. He sees this thing out. Really,
he plays the long game. He does.
He does not. I mean, so what he does is, you can't judge Lou Lamoriello on a month-to-month basis. That's not how he does things. So. And obviously, that's not what Babcock does, how Babcock does things yet, either. I mean, he's doing things in a long range way as well. So for now, I mean, Lou's always played the long game. I mean, that's New Jersey. That's no different. So that's the same.
Yeah, you're right.
That way.
Another point I'd like to make about this too, as we all know, I've covered this league a long time, and I like to think that I knew, Leafs Nation. I've dealt with emails and through social media, and my impression of them for the better part of 3 decades was they're crazy. They're just absolutely nuts. But now my impression of them is they really know hockey. Yeah. Like, their ability to accept and support and understand this rebuilding has really sort of changed my mind about the nutty Leaf Nation. Like, they've gone from groups that send me just, terrible emails and social media outbursts and stuff. They get the whole thing. Like, they talk very sophisticated discussions about what should be done next and how it's going and what they're trying to accomplish. And I'm not saying they go overboard, but a lot of fan bases do. But they really, really understand how this all works. They really do. It's before, I guess what I realize now is they were just suffering from the angst of being a miserable franchise for so long.
And a lot of them remembering when they weren't miserable. Too, because
the older ones for sure, yeah.
Right, there was errors now. So now a lot of them have never known anything but this. So there's a lot of the younger kids who have known this. I mean, Roenick scoring that goal to eliminate the Leafs in the playoffs, still is like the end, is the beginning of the end, right, of that. the beginning of that Leafs team not ever being good again. And since then, right, I mean, that's a long time ago.
You're talking about a decade of a fan base begging their franchise to rebuild. telling them, like when Brian Burke was hired, they were saying, we want you to rip this team to shreds and rip it down to the bare floor and start over. And Brian Burke came in and traded for Phil Kessel and traded 2 first-round picks. And that's why the reaction, I mean, there was a reaction to the organization before that because, they brought in John Ferguson Jr., and John Ferguson Jr. was basically told by the ownership, you cannot, we need to have playoff gates. You got to basically, use a Band-Aid on this team instead of, just tearing it apart. And they didn't do that. And finally, when they brought in Brendan Shanahan and he told them, I'm not taking this job unless I can do what I need to do. And what was needed to be done was to tear this thing to shreds. And if you look 2 years later, where is this franchise now? No, they've had some luck. They got Marner, they got Matthews, but this team is in such a much better place 2 years later than they were at any time.
No question.
Well, you'll get there, Mike. That's the point. You'll get there.
Brian Burke came in, there was an unbelievable amount of people who wanted Brian Burke to come in. I mean, we covered that. That was the time when, I used to talk to Brian. I remember having lunch with Brian Burke one time and saying that he was still with Anaheim and saying, well, we know you're eventually going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs GM. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm happy where I am. And that was 2 years before he ever even took the job there. So there was an outcry. So those Leaf fans they first tried that with him. Like as much as people want to blame Brian Burke, I think that's what the fan base wanted them to do. I mean, maybe not the 2 draft picks and all that, but they wanted to go for it still. They wanted to, Well,
that was the whole perception that Burke was a strong-minded, strong-willed guy who could demand to get autonomy, which he did. And then, they thought, okay, well, now the team will do what they need to do, what they've needed to do for years. And then he went the different direction and went for the quick fix.
And it's a good reason teams don't listen.
I don't think he went for the quick fix. What I think he tried to do was to change on the fly, which is very, very, very tricky.
Yeah.
And much more difficult and more unpredictable.
And maybe a bit antiquated, too.
In this era. For sure. But it was interesting. I was watching NHL Network, and maybe I enjoyed this because I agree with him, and that's generally a base.
I enjoyed it.
But Brian Lott was talking about the rebuilding of the team. And you know what I've always said about this? If I'm an owner of the team and the GM walks in and says, I got this 5-year plan, I say, get out of my office.
right.
Like, I don't want to hear about it. This is the salary cap era. And talent gets spread around and everything else. I want to hear about a 3-year plan is what and that's essentially what Brian Lawton said, that he felt that it takes 3 years to, kind of strip it down and then build it back up to where you're respectable again. And I think that line of thinking has become more of an accepted practice. I think even with the Maple Leafs, we've seen what they've done, in 2 years and in 3 years, they're going to be, they're not going to be the Stanley Cup champion, but they're going to be there. I mean, they're as I said before, they're a fascinating team now. Mm-hmm. If they had any luck with the rebuild of the defense, they might be scary right now because they did strip it down to the chassis, but they've built a NASCAR. It's got turbocharged.
Oh, yeah, no, they're solid. I mean, they're going
to. I mean that forward group is great, and Mike's right. They had a little bit of luck, but they only had luck in terms of the idea was to be bad enough to pick early, and it just so happened that draft they got Austin Matthews, but they've got other younger players that I think we all like.
I mean, they could have had Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews. Remember that? I mean, they were that bad that they could have done that.
Yeah, I mean, it was the right time to pursue this strategy.
Yeah, and they do, and they're doing the fans are incredibly intelligent. I mean, you even saw at the World Cup of Hockey. I was amazed at the World Cup of Hockey at the intelligence of the fans. Honestly, there were people who were really getting, and that was the first time I spent an extended period of time in the Toronto area. So talking to people over time and seeing how they reacted, even to the games, even fans that were there just for games that didn't involve Canada or the USA, but they were just hockey fans. They really knew what they were talking about. Let's move off of there for a second, and let's go to an interesting statistic for today. My interesting stat for today is this: there is one team in the NHL right now, okay, who in every game they have played, the team opposing them has come out with at least 1 point. Isn't that a pretty crazy stat? So there's one team that every time they've played this year, the team has given up, that played them has either beaten them or lost them in overtime. So they've gotten at least 1 point every game.
I'm going to say that's the Flyers.
Nope.
No.
Vancouver.
No. The Canucks have been shut out like 3 or 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pittsburgh.
That right? The LA Kings, by the way. The LA Kings.
Yeah.
Right, when you play the LA Kings, you're good for at least 1 point every game this year so far. That's pretty nuts considering it's November. I mean, that's a crazy stat. That means how close the Kings have been in all their games.
Well,
go ahead.
The one stat I'd like to point out about, especially for all the advanced stat geeks, look at their puck possession numbers. They're still there. They're still there.
Yeah, they're still there right now.
Their goaltending is been a little lost. I mean, I think Budai, as somebody mentioned earlier, has come in and did a decent job. But what has kept him in it is that they are still the best puck possession team. They're right up there.
Yeah. Can I say something that I realized the other day? I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead, Mike. You go first.
But the problem is that they're not converting it into goals as much as they normally would. I mean, I'm looking it up right now.
Right. And that's really been the problem with the Kings. Not so much the goaltending, but their scoring.
They were the worst goal differential in the league a couple days ago at -10.
Yeah.
I don't know with the win over Pittsburgh, whether that changed at all, made it to -9. But I mean, really, they're missing Gaborik, and I believe he's going to be out still a little while. They're not getting the production out of, and Kopitar is a two-way guy. He's not a guy who's going to score 100 points, but he's a very effective offensive player. They need more production out of Carter, out of Kopitar, out of Toffoli. And if they can get that, then they can probably stay in the playoff race. But if they don't, then you're putting too much pressure on Budai, and I don't know whether they can survive.
Right. And I want to bring up a puck possession stat here, okay? Because this is not a stat, but just a thought, okay? I was talking to a guy about puck possession the other day who's an old-time coach, and he brought up a couple interesting points. And then I talked to a friend of mine who brought up the same exact points, proving that my friend is much smarter than he realized. And that is this, that when was the last time you saw a team dump and chase on a power play? That is gone. That's something that used to happen all the time. Right now, no one is dumping the puck in on power plays. And his claim was that's because of this puck possession thing. He's like, you have to, the puck possession. His theory was the puck possession has taken the dump and chase out of the game on the power play.
I don't know if it's all of that. I think they're too afraid to do that and not be able to set up their box or their triangle, which every team seems to be like definite on now. Like they've got to get that set up, or they can't just randomly have a play to possibly get a power play goal. Everything has to be the way they practiced it, and I just don't see enough individuality on power plays anymore. That's what I don't see.
Or could it be after hundreds of years of playing that way that some coach looked and said, "Wait a minute, we're throwing the puck away when we have it, and then we're trying to get it back"?
Yeah.
Like I've never really understood that.
Right. I mean, you're right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to dump and chase in the power play, but it doesn't. It does. The old theory was, at least what I was taught when I was a kid, was that because you have an extra player, you can dump and chase and get the puck back. That's your idea.
Well, allegedly, but guys,
it's time to do that.
It does.
But honestly, like if you look at the way that most teams enter the offensive zone, I sometimes think that the dump and chase is just to throw teams off because there's either that drop back in the neutral zone.
Backward pass, we hate it.
My least favorite play in all of the NHL. Right. Everybody does all the time.
There's either that or you have the winger carried in over the blue line, stop and feed it to the point man. There's like 2 or 3 methods that teams will use to enter the zone on the power play. And I think that if you defend against all of them, then sometimes the dump in is a way to shake things up a bit. Well,
I think the dump and chase started where, and Russ can verify this too. Used to the way to thwart a power play was to stand up at the blue line. Everybody would wait up and make it hard to get in. So you'd throw it behind them because they're facing away, and then you'd beat them to the corner.
Yeah, right. If you attack with speed, you're fine. Like that was the whole thing. With the dump and chase doesn't work if everyone's standing on the blue line, waiting for the guy to get across the line. But if everybody's skating forward, the dump and chase doesn't work, right?
But it works if their team is standing up.
Yeah, if their team's standing up, right? Which is like against New Jersey, Florida back in the 90s. I remember you had to dump and chase on the power play because that's the only thing they would do.
But teams are so good at penalty killing now, and there's so much emphasis on young players to get to those loose pucks. that dump and chase makes it hard. It does, because you see teams that still have trouble possessing the puck even with the extra player on the ice.
But another thing I've noticed, and I think this is true, and I would love to do a statistic on this. I don't know. I think there are more shorthanded goals being scored than ever before in the NHL, and I've noted. I might be wrong about that. I really needed, but it just feels as if to me that there's more shorthanded goals being scored, and I think a lot of that has to do with this as well. And this puck possession thing, like I saw a guy the other day, I can't remember what game it was, but I saw a defender the other day holding the puck, waiting for somebody to get open, but holding the puck for way too long. And I'm thinking to myself, is he just worried about his possession stats? And sure enough, he gets the puck stolen away from him, and it's like, hold the puck.
I'll tell you what, I only see more shorthanded goals against the teams that don't have two defensemen on the power play and use the forward high, and that forward inevitably gets beat.
Right. And that's a good point too. I mean, that strategy now, almost every team is playing the single guy on the point, right?
Right.
Which is a weird one, because it should make it easier to clear the zone, because the whole concept of clearing.
Yeah, you've got to be so good with that puck, and there's very few forwards that really can pull it off the right way. It seems like a lot should be able to, but they just can't.
I think they get nervous because they know that it's a disaster.
Exactly.
The puck, I've seen some really confident guys just look, out of sync when they're back there, because they think, oh my God, if I lose the puck here, it's gonna look ridiculous.
It actually happened to Drew Doughty in the final of the World Cup of Hockey. That exact play. I remember this specifically. He was Drew Doughty. They were playing that power play. He was the one guy on the back, and he gave up the puck, and they almost scored shorthanded. Europe almost scored shorthanded off of it, because it was just one of these things like, holy cow. I mean, if Carey Price isn't back there, who knows, right? But yeah, that is a nerve-wracking play. And also, I think, and it was interesting for a while to see the single point guy, and then the two guys in the slot and one guy on the net. I mean, the Flyers kind of do it all the time. That's what they've always done, right? For this, the Flyers are but it's become predictable to beat that. I think it's predictable to now beat the one guy back. And when to a 2-point man, I feel as if you got more movement of players on the power play than this system. This system feels like everyone just gets set. Like the guys back there, the two guys are on the board.
It's like in the NFL. Most teams use a West Coast offense, like Mike said, and like we all pretty much are thinking. There's not that much variation anymore on the power play.
Right. We're about 10 or 11 games into the season. There have been 27 shorthanded goals.
That feels like a lot, right?
It feels like a lot.
I don't know. I remember my Strat-O-Matic goal days. Mike, the guys were 1 to 2. There were not that many, and now I think there will be a lot more. I mean, if we played
only the guys like Gretzky, who scored a bunch of shorthanded goals, or like Anders Kaller from the New York Islanders would have a high rate. The funny thing is, though, and I noticed this last night, teams, Toronto and Buffalo, now these are two young teams, but teams are not using the grizzled veteran like the Mike Keane on the penalty kill. They're using the young guys who are much quicker, because they can close the gap, they can get in front of the shot, they can and they're a risk at going the other way. Only a team like the Rangers, who have Michael Grabner, who's got ridiculous speed,
right,
at being a veteran at almost 30 years old, use it. But I think a lot of teams are using younger players because they're faster.
So we should switch gears and talk about that Ranger-Edmonton game, because
I want to.
I noticed a few things. The first thing is Cam Talbot played a really terrific game, and yet if you look at the stat sheet, he lost 5-3. Now, the Rangers outshot Edmonton, which, you would expect, I guess, to happen, because the way the Rangers have sort of opened things up lately. But they really were able to bottle up the top line, like Mike was talking about, of Edmonton. Now, McDavid had a point, but they weren't a huge factor. And the other problem was, for Edmonton on defense, it's not like they had the wrong defense, but they were vulnerable to a lot of stretch passes. Not just one or the occasional second one, but there were probably 3 or 4 really good ones. And so the mobility of their defense is still something that is plaguing them. And again, it makes Cam Talbot look worse, because there were so many times where he was playing great positional goalie. The Rangers were peppering him down low, and he stopped everything. Rick Nash could have had 2 or 3 goals last night, but he didn't, because of Cam Talbot. So I'm just saying that Edmonton, they have to tinker with this team a little bit, even with what they have, because McClellan kind of almost admitted he thought that team was sort of waiting to get into overtime, but they never got there.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on Edmonton so far?
I got 3 things about the Rangers and the Oilers. Number number one, the Rangers are better than people are giving them credit for.
Yes.
Like those moves they made in the offseason have really changed the look of this team. And usually you don't pay attention to what players are saying, but Steppen said earlier that when he was talking about the quickness, and he just says we're playing faster. Well, they really are. I mean, if you watch this team, what's it remind you of? It reminds you a little bit of the way the Penguins played last season. Yeah. And, there's just a lot more quickness. That's number one. Number two, I just did my list of breakthrough people, the guys that I thought were kind of establishing themselves, like Scheifele in Winnipeg and guys like that. And who I put on that list was Cam Talbot. Now, he's 29 years old, and I wasn't going to put him on because I thought he's too old. But, Dubnyk was 28 when he moved to Minnesota, and that's when he sort of found his way. Oh, yeah. And Dubnyk is a really good goalie now.
Great comparison.
And he's a premium goalkeeper. And so I think Talbot, I agree with what Russ said about, he's playing well even when they lose. And, his only issue. And thirdly, I get the Larson for Hall trade. I do. I think the Devils won it. I will always think that because Hall is such a and Adam Larson fits, but he isn't making a big enough difference yet. Like he's fourth in minutes and he's doing the job, but if I'm going to give away Hall, I want more for that. I want a little bit more than a guy who's fourth in minutes.
Yeah, Hall's got like 5 goals in 8 games.
I talked about this the other day, and I said, the thing that really hit me, Kevin, was exactly what you're saying, where Larson's good. I mean, he's no question he's better than what they had before. But then you also sit back and you remember that they got relatively close to getting
Seth Jones for
Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, right? So that was a discussed trade, at least, or rumored to be discussed. And if that was even close to possibly happening, you have to ask yourself, and then when you look at Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's playing like a third-line role now, even without Hall being there, I think that there had to be another option.
Well, I just wrote on this today, and I actually quoted Ray Shero. No one presents a greater defense for that trade from the Oilers' perspective better than Devils general manager Ray Shero. I mean, he defends this up and down from the Oilers' perspective. And I understand, like, I get it, and obviously the GM fraternity sort of stick together. But his point is that in a salary cap world, that the old concept of who gets the better player wins the deal is out the door, because you're building a team and you got to have all the elements, and sometimes you got to give up more to get the element you need. Like I totally understand that.
But what you're saying is, and I think it would offset what Shero's saying just a bit, is Larson would be the right guy if they had, let's say, Ryan McDonough on that team as their number one, but they don't have that number one, and that's the problem.
I was at the Toronto Edmonton game on Tuesday night, and you had a $3 million defenseman in Chris Russell, 2 $4 million defensemen in Clefbaum and Larson, and the best defenseman for Edmonton on the ice was the guy making $925,000 in Darnell Nurse.
Right. Well, that's another argument for why the Oilers made that trade, and why they maybe they needed to make that trade, and that is that he's tied up at $4 million, and they're not worried about him going somewhere, and they got him for 5 years. He's there, and he's a good player. Like that. That's the tough thing about this. Larson is a very good player.
Yes.
But they gave up a lot to give him. Now, let me go back to the final thing. Like, I still like this Oilers team. I like where they're at, and I think they're just sort of learning now how to deal with playing those kind of games. Like, they're not experienced enough to know how to beat the Rangers when the Rangers are playing this well.
Right.
They have the ability to. Yeah. They don't know how to do it. So
that's totally fair. I mean, the Rangers. There's so much more. All the playoff experience on the Rangers. All that. I mean, there's tons of stuff there. I mean, and this team is not. I love where the Oilers are. I still stand by my prediction that they're going to make the playoffs and that they're going to finish ahead of the LA Kings. Because I'm going to remind you of that every week, because that was.
Please do. Yeah, we need reminding of that.
But I do think
right after you remind us about how Nashville
have very little playoff experience. I mean, at all. They really don't have playoff experience on that team. And then when they play certain teams, and it's going to get harder to play those teams as the team gets older, because right now the season, at the beginning of the year, there's a whole new set of rules that kick the other rules will kick in sometime in December or January, and then there'll be another set of rules that'll kick in March, right? So right now, the beginning of the season, they're doing very well, and they're going to be in this thing. Whether or not they can stay in it or not is a good question. A couple really fun things real fast. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Dallas Stars Jumbotron is one of the most hilarious things in the NHL. The guys who run that are just phenomenal. I mean, really just have a great sense of humor. And this was sent to me. This is a great picture. So let me show you this here. So I'm gonna right here. So they put this up. Where is it? Hold on. All right, it's right. Rats. All right. Well, I'll just tell you what it is.
Rats.
Rats. All right. I'm gonna try to get this here. So you can see this here. So I know this looks kind of funky. And so they put up their greatest blues of all time. And so it goes Brett Hull, and then Periwinkle, then Cobalt, then Royal, and then Cyan.
Cyan.
I think that's, first of all, that's brilliant.
That is brilliant.
You got the stars. They get.
Although I'd argue that Royal should be higher, but that's just me.
Yeah, and cyan is not really blue, is it? But anyway, I guess
it is. No, cyan is the printer's version of blue.
Okay,
it is.
No. All right, another quick fun stat. The Flyers last year lost 5 games when the other team pulled their goalie and tied it. And I talked a lot about that earlier. That Provorov was a good thing to have because they needed to shut down defense at the end of the games. They've won 3 games already this year when they've pulled their goalie and they've tied it in the last minute and gone on to win in overtime. It's really fascinating. It's 3 times.
It is fascinating, but I don't think that will last. Like, that magic is not going to last.
I mean, it's not. It's definitely not something you can make a habit out of. But the fact that already they have taken 3 games where they shouldn't have any points at all, and within the last minute turn those into 6 points.
Yeah,
that's impressive, and that shows the turning of a corner. Those are the kind of things you see when a team turns a corner. That's like, okay, that's something. It's not phenomenal, and they were against not the greatest of teams, but they managed still. And last night they did it again against the Islanders. So there's that. And then this other stat, in honor of the fact that in the United States of America, we are having a little decision making going on next Tuesday, and that is going to.
Yeah, I made my decision last week, and
you can vote already, right?
Yeah, I voted already. Yeah.
According to Donald Trump, I can too, but he doesn't seem to understand that I can't. He said the other day, if you're going out in Pennsylvania to early vote, we don't have early voting in Pennsylvania. So anyway, but yes. So
shocking. You mean he's clueless? Shocking.
No. He just apparently was misinformed.
Yes, there you go.
All right. So one of the things on the docket in the United States of America is currently I don't know if you know this or not, there are 25 states, which is half of our states, if you're taking track, 25 states that have legalized medical marijuana. Okay. And there are another 4 states that are trying to legalize medical marijuana in this election, and now there are 4 states that currently have legalized recreational marijuana, and there's 2 more that are trying to do that. And eventually, and I know Canada has medical marijuana, right? So, in their one country. So anyway, that's how it works, right? So now, in doing that, an article came out on civilized.life, which is I know not necessarily where you go for your hockey news, but it came out with this interesting concept that I did not know, that in the NHL does test for cannabis use, but does not suspend for it.
It's not performance enhancing.
It's not a performance enhancing drug. Where it is in the NBA and the NFL, they will suspend you for it. Major League Baseball and the NHL don't. They have a different rule than that. They don't punish at all, actually. And in Major League Baseball, they have a little bit of, they will punish you. I think they'll fine you or something like that. But in the NHL, apparently, from at least how this article was written, nothing. Players aren't even identified that this happened.
Yeah, they're not identified for sure.
I know one because I wrote his book and he admitted in his book.
Yeah. And I've heard stories of players who've tested positive, who've actually gone to rehab in the off seasons and stuff like that. But one very specific player that I know of that did that. But I just think that it's kind of interesting that the NHL doesn't test for this drug. I'm not. I'm not a user of marijuana, and if I was, I would tell you, because it's it's not legal in Pennsylvania anyway. But I've never tried it even.
Well,
anyone would like to try it with me, I'm totally open for it, but I have never tried it. So
the the funny thing is, you go from one end of the scale like that to the NFL, who suspends a player for 4 games if he smoked marijuana, and I know that for a fact because the Bills have about 7 guys who've been suspended for 4 games because of that. And it's, it's especially in the NFL where, pain regulation and being able, some of these guys have had knee injuries and other injuries, and smoking marijuana is, will help them in terms of relieving the pain. But the NFL seems not to have any kind of flexibility when it comes to this.
So the NHL, this is what the NHL does. If a player is found to have dangerously high levels of a narcotic or a cannabinoid, he is subject to mandatory assessment by doctors working for the NHL and NHLPA's substance abuse and behavioral health program. Those doctors could decide to refer him to a mandatory substance abuse treatment. The assessment and referral aren't meant to be disciplinary, however, they are not mandatory. So in short, the NHL doesn't want players to use drugs like marijuana, but they don't try to stop them with as much vigor as other leagues do.
They'll just tell you if you have a problem, and if you want to do something about it, they'll help you.
Right. So, and then this writer goes on to say this, and that might be a good thing. There's no doubt that NHL players who are lucky enough to make it to Stanley Cup Finals could use a painkiller like marijuana to treat aches and pains that come with fighting through the playoffs. I'm not going to buy that. But, and then there are some players who've admitted to using it as a painkiller. I know I've talked to players who have. So, thoughts on this? I mean, it's a very controversial thing in America.
I don't have a problem with it.
Anybody? Kevin?
Nope, I don't either.
I know someone who was, dying of cancer, and they could not eat.
Yeah.
They had to use, I think,
oh no, I'm 100% with you on that.
Yeah, and so I'm all for it, and I'm all for it in terms of in terms of a pain regulator. I think it makes sense. I know that some people think it's a gateway drug, that it makes you more apt to use other opioids or whatever, but I think honestly it's probably, and I'm not saying it's harmless, I'm not saying kids should use it, but I'm saying if it's an adult and there's somebody who is in a professional sport, they're probably already using it. But I think it's something that should be allowed.
Yeah. I mean, there are players who come out later in their careers. Not in the NFL. One guy came out recently and said he was just high all the time when he played. So that does happen. But I don't see that. I don't think you could do that in hockey.
That was Ricky Williams, probably.
I don't think you could do it in hockey. I mean, hockey is played at such a speed. Slowing yourself down with something like, from what I understand it, that definitely slows down your capacity. Seems like the wrong idea, Kevin, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's why it's not a ban, because you wouldn't,
Right.
The banned substances are things that are used to make yourself better. And
Right.
That's obviously not something you would use to make yourself better. The only reason you would use it is for recreational use, or to relieve pain.
Right. Okay. Well, I just wanted your opinion on that. I thought it was interesting. And finally, I wanted to bring up this thought too. I've heard some rumors about Willie Desjardins possibly being on the hot seat. We always talk about who's the first coach that's going to get fired, and I don't like to report on rumors of firings. I just heard that he's on the hot seat. I didn't hear he was going to be gone tomorrow or anything like that. But the Canucks have started off well, but have struggled as of late.
Well, I mean, somebody has to be the guy that's on the hot seat, and
right.
They have not performed well. Although I don't think it's even remotely his fault.
No.
And it's the same thing on Long Island. I mean, you got to assume that Capuano is facing some pressure as well, because they really need to be a playoff team, no ifs, ands, or buts. Right now they're not playing at that level, and it's a little bit messy because of the goaltending situation. And by the way, like, the whole idea that Halak would be traded is, just bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Where's he going to go, with that salary?
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen. Ruby's the guy that will be traded, if anybody will, because you get a little something. Like, he'd be a perfect fit for LA, the team that lost him.
Or Grice, because Grice is a UFA at the end of the year. Of the 3 goaltenders, Halak was the one that was the least tradable because he's got another year at $4.5 million. And I don't think anybody wants to take, unless they need a starter, anybody wanted to take on a goaltender with another year in his contract for such a high figure. When it comes to Vancouver,
I'm sorry, Mike, but what if this? I mean, what if Dustin Brown was involved in this? Just throwing it out there, just like
No.
another player who's making a lot of money.
Well, it just doesn't make any sense for the Kings to end up with 2 goalies making that amount of money. I mean, they'd like to get rid of Dustin Brown, but Gar Snow isn't going to take on Dustin Brown.
Yeah, and regarding Vancouver, if Willie Desjardins on a short leash, then so should Jim Benning be, because when you look at that team and everybody. I mean, I looked at that team in the offseason and them going and signing Louis Eriksson to take a final run at making the playoffs with the Sedins in their mid-30s, when that team probably should have gone the way of rebuild and tear down.
Here's the problem. Like, I agree with you that, Benning has not performed like the Canuck fan base would like him to perform. But, he's in a bad spot because – the Sedins make a teardown distasteful. They're still playing at a high level, and it's what do you do? These are popular players. These are guys that love the city.
Right.
Kids have grown up there. They've given a lot. Like, do you tear it down, everything except them? Do you ask them to be traded? Like, that is a complicated situation. Like, I'm a little bit sympathetic toward, what it is that they should do there, because it wasn't as simple. That the Maple Leafs didn't have anybody even remotely like that. They could all go.
Well, you know what this is, Kevin? This is the Leafs circa 2007. This is the Leafs with Matt Sundin. Matt Sundin was still an effective player. So were the Sedins, and Matt Sundin did not allow that team to get bad enough, because he would still score 30 goals.
No, that's right.
And they would do the same thing. So I get it from that point of view. But the thing is, I mean, if Benning is carrying the water for ownership, and the ownership is saying we got to win and we're going to do this, and you have to go out and get players to making the playoffs possible, then ownership is to blame. But I just think that looking at that team, where they were, the state of their defense, and there were too many holes to fill, and they were starting to go in that young way with guys like Virtanen and Horvat, that they should just have continued that. But I get the point that the Sedins are still too good.
I tell you that really the only way you could do this is that you have a meeting with Benning, ownership, and the Sedins, and you just lay it out to them and say, look, we need to rebuild. What do you want us to do? Like, in terms of, how we handle you guys. Do you want to just stick it out with us? And but they'll hold it back because they're competitive enough to do that. They'll make it harder to strip it down to the chassis. If you keep them. So
I believe they have 1 more year left in their contract. I mean, would it be beneficial to the Canucks to retain 50% of their salary, find a team that would be willing to take, and not to say willing to take them on like they're an imposition. They're still good hockey players, but retain the salary, trade them someplace, get some draft picks, and do it that way. Because if they're going to finish their career in 29th place, I think they would rather go someplace and try to win a Stanley Cup.
Well, you would think, although they, like there's some thought that they may actually stay in Vancouver and live there. Now, generally Swedes, as a general rule, to go home, and they may too. But I talked to them about that last, not this fall, but the last fall, at the NHL media day, and both of them said they were considering it, staying there. That this has become home to them. So I think the only way to do it, like, they've played together so long, you got to find a way to allow them to play together.
Yeah.
So the only way you can make a trade like that would probably be in the off season.
I would think so.
I mean, you could start the process. You sit down now and you lay it out to them and you say, look, why don't we try to, and you guys can be involved this summer. But in the meantime, at the trade deadline, you start moving everyone out. And then this summer you try to accommodate them and say, where do you want to go? I mean, they actually deserve that.
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
Deserve to be treated, where basically you say, go ahead, you and your agent, go try to work out a deal, and then and see what we can do.
But in doing that, they might have to very well have to accept the fact that they're going to go separate places. I mean, I think it's going to be really hard for somebody.
Well, I not in the off season. I think you could get them together.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, they could go where all great Swedes go to retire, Detroit.
Right. No. I mean, I don't think there is a more, as much as we say, like, the Swedes do love to go home, I don't think there's a more Swedish-feeling city than Vancouver in North America. Like, North America, Vancouver really, I mean, I've been to Sweden, I've been to Stockholm, I've been to Malmo and places like that, and I would say Vancouver is probably about as close as you can get to having, like, a Swedish feel to it. It's interesting. I mean, I can see why they would like it there, put it that way. It really has a good...
I think the Detroit Red Wings dressing room has a Swedish feel to it.
It generally does. Yes, it does.
It feels like, like Stockholm to me.
Is it furnished by IKEA?
So.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get out of here, I want to point to your article today, Kevin, on Craig Anderson and in the USA Today. It's a really good story entitled "Senators Craig Anderson Knows He's Not Alone, Fighting Against Cancer," in his wife's fight against cancer. Sorry. This was you got some good quotes in here. This must be an interesting story to write.
Well, I mean, I these stories.
Yeah.
So, basically I just wrote it based on, what I saw. But, the one thing that I pointed out that I think may be lost in some younger fans is there's a big history of cancer fighting in the NHL.
Right.
Mario Lemieux, finishing his last radiation treatment and then playing in the Spectrum and getting ovation. Saku Koivu, Cullen in Tampa Bay.
Phil Kessel.
Phil Kessel is
a big one too.
A cancer survivor as well. So, when hockey fights cancer is not just a slogan in the NHL.
Right.
That's cancer has touched this sport, and the players I find just respond more. So I was really touched by the hotel, but standing out and waiting out there is to give Anderson applause for what he did.
It really was. It really was something. And it's Craig Anderson is such a good person as well. So it really does hit home, that just in general, and I hope everything, prayers are definitely of all the Hockey Buzz community and all the hockey community are with him and his wife during this whole period, and the family during this period of time. Incredibly difficult. But yeah, you're right. Hockey it becomes a very small world all of a sudden, when someone gets sick. That's what I felt like. If suddenly the barriers don't seem to really matter as much, and they don't matter at all. I think when someone is sick, like I'll never forget. I mean, there was no one who was booed more than Mario Lemieux in Philadelphia. No one. That was, Mario Lemieux and Jágr. But yeah, I was there for that when he took the lap around the ice in Philadelphia, and the place went crazy. And that's just, it just shows that, the hockey community, they really have their head on straight about these things. So it's a great story. I definitely recommend it for sure. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today, guys. We are going to get out of here. It's the weekend, and we appreciate you. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And Mike, you too. Thank you for coming on too. Out the buzz, everyone. It is just hockey. Enjoy your weekend. Lots of great games on tap. Have fun. We'll see you Monday.